Thank you very much, Commissioner. Pardon me, Joe. I got to do it to you. I won't even mention Earl Weaver. I'm sorry. I can't. Thank you very much. Those are very kind words, and I think, as everybody has alluded to over this weekend, you are doing one great job, and it hasn't been an easy one. So I think baseball's in great hands. Thank you very much. You're doing a heck of a job. This could be tough. I was crying at his speech. But seriously, you know, it is a great honor to go through this with a guy like Joe Morgan. You have to understand what baseball is all about, and part of that is the competitiveness. I mean, it says so right here. But there isn't anybody on this stage who would not be in the Hall of Fame if they weren't a good competitor. And I said yesterday at the press conference that I'm glad that Joe Morgan, I mean, I faced him in the '77 All-Star game, hit a home run. That's because I didn't want to walk him. I knew what would happen if I did. He'd steal second, and if he was feeling particularly peppy that day, he would steal third, and then a guy would hit a ground ball to second base, and I'd be trailing by 1 run, so I let him hit a home run. I'm not sure if he's aware of that, but but, you know, the numbers speak for themselves, and I think more importantly is that we had a chance to play against Cincinnati in 1970, and we were fortunate enough to win that World Series. Probably wouldn't have won it if Joe Morgan was on that ball club. Because what he did is he added a number of elements to the opposition. If you were the opposing pitcher, that it was very tough to deal with, not only on a personal level if you were pitching against him, but from a team level, and that was intensity, speed, which is a factor that I never liked. It makes you change your whole tempo. And if you have to pitch against him in an All-Star game, or you get behind him in the count, as I did in an All-Star game, he's able to hit home runs. Not to mention the fact that I think he did what all players do when they want to have great careers. They work hard at their craft. Wasn't a particularly good defensive player, so I understand. At least that's what Robin Roberts told me, but he worked himself. No, seriously, and Robin's saying that he played with him his first year, and he said, you know, you got to follow through throwing, you got to work on your fielding. He did, and that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. So in this year, when I would happily come up here by myself and get inducted to the Hall of Fame, it makes it even more special to have a guy like Joe Morgan, who meant so much to all the ball clubs he played for. So again, my congratulations on just a great career. And you know, as Joe said, this is a day that we're obviously, Joe and I are being inducted, but to me it's a celebration of baseball, because I think all you had to do was be here yesterday and walk through the streets of Cooperstown, or look outside today, especially yesterday, 5 or 6 hours of rain, and people were still out there, you know, still here in spite of the rain, caring about baseball, and that's what it's all about. I guess I should mention the fact that we, as players, don't elect ourselves to the Hall of Fame. So we're elected by the baseball writers. My congratulations to Tobias Sam, who I don't think he ever did one of my games, or he would have had a lot to talk about, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Jerry Holtzman, who I've dealt with for many years in Chicago, their congratulations to them. And of course, my thanks to the Baseball Writers of America, who I guess felt fit to elect me to the Hall of Fame. That's how you get here, and I guess I was second to Bob Feller, and that's a statement in itself. I would have got in here with a bare 75% minimum votes, but to be second in the all-time list, again, I'm not sure if that, in fact I am sure what it means is that in that particular year you got a lot of votes, but I'm just thrilled to be in the Hall of Fame, and to be second in the total votes to a Bob Feller, a guy that missed 4 or 5 years in the Army and still won over 260 games. They used to test his fastball by racing horses and motorcycles, so you knew how hard he'd throw. But when I grew up, I wanted to be like a Bob Feller, so it's just great to be here. I think I should introduce my family and friends. Well, not all of them, because I don't want to get a big head. But my wife, Joni, is here. Joni, will you please just stand up quickly? She's my new wife. She's not that new, but she's really been a great help. It's been a very busy year working for the Orioles and ESPN, as Joe mentioned. Her son, PJ, is here today. This is not in any order, but my dad is next, Max Palmer. Max has signed more autographs than I have this weekend. Thank you. I worked on that gym. If you just get the J a little bit better on the gym, I think we can. And my two daughters. Jamie is 23. She works up at the Children's Museum in Boston, graduated from William Smith Hobart. And she's here today. Will you please stand? I have not seen a paycheck, but she does tell me she has a job. And my other daughter, the one that was hanging around with Ted Williams' son last night, what did she say? What do you think? Kelly Palmer. They were hanging around at the Hall of Fame, so I think everything was all right. But Kelly goes to the University of Colorado, and you know, a lot of other people are here, my friends, and I. You know, as Joe said, the ones that stayed, you know, I see just through the thing, Davey Leonard, who played with me for the Orioles, was my roommate for many years. Davey. Friends in the restaurant business, the Pacinos, the Engleharts, who Dr. Englehart taught me everything about planning so I could get through those long summers when I went 3 or 4 starts without winning. So it's nice to see your friends here, and especially a guy like Mike Flanagan, who was pitching with Toronto early in the year, was here. I don't know if he's still here. Then all the way from Kenosha, Wisconsin. I think some people wonder why all these baseball writers got underwear for the last 15 years since I've been eligible, but the people from Jockey were here yesterday just to make sure I had my underwear on. You know, it's an interesting thing about that. I found out, I was talking to Bill Herman, who works for Jockey. He said, you know, did you know that Yogi Berra used to model in our underwear long before they ever thought about using you? I guess I can talk about Yogi because he's not here, but I just can't imagine Yogi Berra in a pair of boxer shorts. But seriously, you know, I had a wonderful career, and it all started. I introduced you to my father, Max. In 1963, I signed with the Orioles, and you know, a number of other ball clubs. The ironic thing is that the other club that really wanted me to sign with them was the Houston Astros. So Joe and I could have been teammates. Maybe even we could have been traded to Cincinnati at the same time. But in Scottsdale, Arizona, was Jim Russo, I believe, is here. He was the scout that signed me. Jim Wilson also was there. And you think back about why things happen. In 1980, the Orioles, or towards the end of 1979, the Orioles were bought by a guy by the name of Edward Bennett Williams, who was maybe, a lot of people feel, the best trial lawyer that ever lived. And he bought the ball club right before the World Series. We lost to the Pirates, and Willie Stargell had a terrific World Series in 7 games. I think it was 7 games. Yeah, it was. We lost. We lost to him twice. I lose count of. But anyway, we lost to the Pirates, and Ed Williams bought the ball club, and the next year we're up in Fenway Park and we're not playing well, and Earl Weaver had tried everything. He had threatened us. He had tried to give us enticements. You know, I'll pay for your green fees. I don't know. He was trying everything to win, and Edward Bennett Williams asked us, could he talk to the ball club? And Ed, I guess one of the reasons he was such a great lawyer, he was always totally prepared, and he had great oratory skills. And Ed was the type of guy that when he bought the ball club, he told everybody, I know nothing about baseball, and 3 months later, knew more than Earl Weaver. He was that type of guy. You may know some of those people. I know we have a lot of people that are interested in baseball out there. But anyway, he talked to us about the fact that baseball and being a trial lawyer were very, very comparable. He said he used to prepare for a case, he'd be in court for a month and a half, and he'd have a lot of problems losing. He couldn't really deal with it. You know, had problems dealing with how to rationalize with putting everything you have into something and then losing. And he talked about the total commitment. That's what everybody sitting behind me was able to do during their careers, totally commit themselves. But I never heard it verbalized like Ed Williams was able to do it that day. He talked about a spiritual, a intellectual, a physical, and the total emotional level of committing yourself. And you know, it sounded very good. I mean, he said it as well, and he said all you can ever ask of yourself is to totally commit yourself in those 4 areas. He said all I can ask you as the owner, all the ball club Your teammates can ask of you is the same thing. The only thing that your manager can ask for you, the fans. And once you do that, he says you can walk off the field, you can look at the scoreboard, and you can live with yourself. You can go home even though you wanted to win, knowing you've done your best. So, I thought about that, and then I started thinking, well, how did that come to light in my life? And I go back to when I was, first born. I was adopted, and I was adopted at birth. And, you wonder about the spiritual part of, how does it happen that you have parents that want you, that love you, and are always there for you? It's an amazing thing when you look back at, 44 years ago and think that in the beginning, everything started out properly. I wanted to say hello to a friend of mine who I know is listening and will be listening on ESPN, Jack Geisler, who's 94, would have been here today. Jack was there when I was brought home from the hospital. But anyway, you wonder when you're signing a baseball contract at age 17, and you have a stepfather like Max Palmer who's there saying, I think you ought to sign with the Orioles. I think that, maybe that would be the right thing to do. And looking back on my career, it certainly was. The fact that you have a chance to sign with a ball club that through 1965 and 1984 had the best record in baseball. I don't want to make Tommy Lasorda mad, but year in and year out, the Orioles had the best winning percentage. My first year in Aberdeen, South Dakota, I got a chance to play for a guy that's worked for the Orioles 34 years. That was Cal Ripken Sr. Cal taught me how to... Joe Morgan talked about having fun. Well, we had a ball club that won 13 in a row in spring training, 25 out of their first 29. Out of that ball club, we sent Mark Belanger to the big leagues, Mike Fiore, Eddie Watt, Davey Leonard played about 6 years in the big leagues. He was 16-4 that year. We had a marvelous ball club. Spent 1 year in the minor leagues, and the next year I was in the big leagues. That following year, I went to the Instructional League, and I met a guy for the first time, George Bamberger. I led the Northern League that first year in Aberdeen in wild pitches, walks, strikeouts, and earned run average. I had no idea where the ball was going. But somewhere along the line, George made it a point to change my windup. Used to have me like a boxer where you shadow box in front of a mirror. I'd go down to the bullpen without a baseball and work on my windup, balance, trying to get everything together so I could have my maximum abilities going towards the hitter, and it seemed to work. We mentioned Lee McPhail. Lee McPhail was my first general manager. What I remember most about 1964 was I was 11-3 at Aberdeen, 6-2 in winter ball, and when I asked him for a raise, he sent me the same contract, which was $500 a month, 7 times in a row. I called one of my friends, and he said, you know what, you ought to tear up that contract and send it back, because I think he's sending you the same one. So I sent him, I tore it up, and I got another one. And the guy said, oh, by the way, also, tell him that your wife is pregnant. Which she wasn't. So I did, and I got a $100 raise. So being 17-5, I got nothing, but for getting my wife pregnant, I got a $100 raise. Now, that's the way baseball's changed. Now they pay you $3 million, and if you make the All-Star game, you get a $50,000 bonus. It's a great world. I think we were born a little bit too early, but I won't worry about that. The second part of Ed Williams' formula was totally committing yourself physically, and I think what always got me in touch with my major league career and my abilities was the fact that I tore my rotator cuff. Back then it was just a sore arm in 1965. I was 21 years of age. I spent 2 years in the minors where I was pretty much introduced as the guy to last beat Sandy Koufax. That gets real old. But when I came back, I went back into our trainers at the time, Ralph Salvon, who was with the Orioles. Joe saw him as a minor league trainer. And Ralph said, you have a hole in your back. And I went and rehabbed it, and 7 weeks later, I went down to the Instruction League. And during those years, I saw a lot of doctors. I saw Robert Kurlan, who was one of the foremost orthopedists out in California. He saved my career. Got rid of something that bothered me for 2 years in a matter of about a day and a half. I saw a doctor in Baltimore, Stanley Cohen, who rehabilitated my arm. And I think the one great thing about having an injury early in your career is that it makes you appreciate what kind of ability you have. I wonder often if I had gone through my career never having any kind of setbacks, if I would have had the same perspective. A guy that I met is part owner of the Red Sox, Arthur Pappas, the Oriole team doctor, who I believe was here yesterday. I don't know if he's still here. Chick Silverstein. He was a tremendous help towards the end of my career. But the one thing about if you're going to be a good Major League Baseball player, you better have a good trainer, and there was no better than Ralph Salva, and I wish he was here. You talked about Ed Williams' intellectual preparation, and I think the greatest thing, and I mentioned it before, was the fact that I played for the best team in baseball from 1965 to 1984. My first year, all I had to do was look around, and Brooks Robinson was here yesterday. Well, he was playing third base. My shortstop was Louis Aparicio. Robin Roberts, who I almost feel like I need to defend because so many guys went 4 for 4 off him, was my first roommate. You know, a man that eventually won 286 games, and Robin put it in the proper perspective. He said, kid, because I think he was 38 and I was 19, he said, you got a good fastball. He said, I think you're smart enough to throw it. And I had a chance to talk to him last night at dinner, and what Robin was able to impart from a wisdom standpoint in 1965, I don't think I ever forgot. The best pitch in baseball is a fastball, even if you don't have the best fastball in baseball. If you know where it's going, if you can throw it low and away and occasionally come up and in and get a breaking ball over every once in a while, you're going to be successful. And if you have a guy like Brooks Robinson playing third base, and Frank Robinson in right field, and Louis Aparicio, and Belanger, and Gritch, and so on down the line, you're going to win a lot of ball games. I always felt the formula for Jim Palmer was, I will do my job, and the Orioles will do theirs, and they did. The commissioner of baseball talked about 6 championship teams. Well, that's what it was all about. I never was really enamored with strikeouts unless you had a guy on third base with less than 2 outs, and then I wanted to strike somebody out. It's not a put down of anybody, but it's just not the way the Orioles taught baseball. All I had to do is look around baseball today to see what kind of organization the Orioles have spawned. Lee McPhail was president of the American League. Frank Cashin runs the Mets. Al Harrison's there. Joe McIlvaine. You go to Milwaukee, you see Harry Dalton. George Bamberger, who was so instrumental in my career, managed the Mets, managed the Brewers. Just down, Jimmy Fry was my first base coach. In fact, in Thomasville, Georgia, my first year, wanted me to play for him in the instructional league or in the winter league, and I said, no, I think I'll go to Aberdeen with Cal Ripken. It was a great decision. But Jimmy's doing a great job in Chicago. So everywhere you look in baseball, you see former Orioles. And I guess the crux of my comments is the fact that I never would have been in the Hall of Fame if it hadn't been for the Orioles. My parents were so supportive. I mean, Max was there when I took his name. My last name used to be Wiesen, and at a Little League banquet in Beverly Hills, I thought that my mother marrying Max when I was about 11 years old, I thought it would be fitting to take his name. But they were always there, and that's what growing up and getting to the big leagues at 19 and having daughters that were supportive. I mean, Kelly wrote a letter to the editor when she was 14. I don't know if Jerry Holtzman would have ever written the article, but somebody wrote an article that said that I didn't care, and Kelly wrote a letter to the editor at 14 years of age. I was shocked. I never knew she even followed baseball. But, you know, things like that you remember. And playing for the Orioles. You know, and the last thing that Ed Williams talked about was the emotional involvement. I think attitude is so important in baseball. When you play 162 games, anybody behind me can tell you that you better show up ready to play. And the guy that taught me about that was Earl Weaver. Earl Weaver's theory was very basic. He said, let's win today and worry about tomorrow. We had our differences. I was 6'4", he was 5'6". And that wouldn't have been a problem, except that every time he wanted to take me out, he wanted to come to the highest point of the mound, and I never would let him. But I learned a lot from Earl Weaver. You know, Joe talked about the salary difference in baseball. The players today are marvelous players. The game has evolved, it's changed. But the truest test of a pitcher is to try to get a good hitter out the 4th time. You don't have to do that anymore, and that's not to downgrade any of the starters now. But what Earl Weaver, and I think one of the reasons I'm in the Hall of Fame, is that Earl had enough confidence in me. He felt that I was better than anybody in the bullpen to give me the ball when the 9th inning started. And that's how you complete games. That's how you win a lot of games. Maybe that's how you win 20 games 8 times. That and playing for great ball clubs. But Earl, there was never one spring training when any Oriole that played for Earl Weaver went to spring training without a chance to be a contending ball club, a chance to win. And that's what baseball is all about. Joe Morgan, as great a player as he was, his impact on baseball was that he was a winner. And that's what Earl Weaver was. I hope that someday maybe he will be considered for the Hall of Fame because he certainly deserves it. couple of more closing comments. Everybody thinks about the Orioles over the years of the Brooks Robinson, the Frank Robinson, and when I think back, I think of guys like Bobby Grich who had the same intensity as Frank Robinson, but not the skills. But I wear a World Series ring, 1983, and that year, you know, the dominant players were Cal Ripken, who was the most valuable player. Eddie Murray was second. Rick Dempsey was the most valuable player in that World Series when we were able to beat Joe Morgan and the Phillies. I had to beat him. I mean, home runs all the time. I mean, I got to say something positive. But maybe this story can just give you an idea of what the Orioles were all about in 1983. Everybody remembers the Ripkens and the Boddickers had a terrific year, and Mike Flanagan and Scotty McGregor and people like that. But I recall a game where we had a utility man who hardly ever played, a guy named Lenny Cicada. And what Lenny's job was that year was to occasionally play second base, and then occasionally, if we ever needed him, catch. And we get about 2/3 of the way through the season, and Lenny spent every day going behind and catching batting practice, and we run out of catchers. Joel Albelli is managing the ball club, and he says, Lenny, you need to catch the 10th inning. Tim Stoddard's pitching, calls for a fastball, Cliff Johnson hits a home run. Well, so they take Stoddard out of the game, they bring in Tippy Martinez. He walks the first batter, and the runner is so anxious to steal second base off of Cicada that Tippy picks him off. The next guy singles, same scenario, he's trying to steal second. Tippy picks him off. The third guy walks, and the same thing happens. 3 pickoffs on 3 base runners. I mean, they all want to run on Lenny Cicada. Well, Lenny Cicada gets up in the bottom of the 10th inning and hits a 3-run home run, and we win. And the interesting thing about that story is that just that day, Lenny Cicada had gone to his agent and said, you know, I don't know if I fit in here anymore. And that's what Oriole baseball was all about for about 19 or 20 years. Something special. Just want to say one thing. As Joe Morgan told you, normally we would have a dinner tonight that we had last night, and that was a dinner that pretty much Bobby Brown, Bill White, presidents of the American and National League respectively, the commissioner of baseball, and some people from the Hall of Fame. And Joe's gave some recommendations for some of the younger players. My biggest fear, my biggest apprehension is that the standards of baseball will lessen. And not because of the fact that the players aren't as good as they used to be, it's because maybe of the salaries. And what motivated Jim Palmer, and I'm not putting down money, there's not one guy back here that wouldn't like to be making $3 million a year for doing what they did. But that's not why they did it. The reason I tried to be as good as I was is because of what these gentlemen behind me were able to do. I mean, the fact that Warren Spahn won 363 games, I wasn't left-handed, so I was going to be another Bob Feller or a Bob Lemon, or I was going to be another Don Drysdale who's not able to be with us. And that's what baseball's all about. To grow up as a kid in New York, being a Yankee fan, which proves nobody's perfect, to dream about pitching against Mickey Mantle or Roger Maris, guys that I did have a chance to pitch against, and then to eventually be one of them really makes me feel something that I never thought I'd get in touch with, that you are part of a special fraternity. And what seemed to be most poignant last night was not the fact that these guys had a lifetime batting average of .331, but that they cared so much about themselves. Thank you very much.